got it done. There's a little pad and a little groove, and then snap it in.
I am Barbara Wells. I'm co-curator of the exhibition Etched in Sonoma, which is upstairs, together with Simon Blattner. And today we're going to talk about collecting prints, the inside story. And joining me are Chester Arnold, Simon Blattner, David Keaton. And if you could each please just relatively briefly introduce yourselves so the audience knows who's talking today.
Hi everyone, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Great, it's a pleasure to be here. My name is David Keaton. I have a gallery that I opened on Broadway in 2020, about 3 weeks before shutdown. So it's been an interesting journey, but I've been involved professionally in art for about almost over 20 years now, mostly working with historical Bay Area artists and their estates. So that's been kind of my background. I've been kind of fell into curating museum shows lately. I had a show at Monterey Museum focused on Zen and the counterculture, and I'm doing a show at the University of Pacific in January on a little artist group called the Firehouse. I started collecting. I was really lucky to grow up in the Monterey Peninsula, and everyone knows the great photographers down there, F64, the Westons, Ansel, Ruth Bernard, and so I got into it really early as a teenager with summer jobs, and I started buying photography, which is another addition if anyone wants to talk about that, but I think we're going to be focused on fine art prints mostly. But quickly, that's my background.
So I'm Simon Blattner, and with Barbara Wells, we've curated a couple shows with Maki Ozawa at the Sonoma Valley Museum of Art, and my boss is in the room, Linda Keaton, and it was a terrific show, I think, and I had done a couple of other book shows for the museum previous to that, one about Latin American books and another one about American bookmaking. So I'm a handmade paper maker, or I was. I can't do it anymore. It's very physical, by the way, in case you decide you're making something that isn't blender paper. Making sheets of paper, and I generally made Japanese-style papers, is very physical, and at some point I kind of just wore down. I didn't get into anything around art until I was in my early 40s, and I was working for a paper company, and I was sent to Japan, and I came back aflame with the idea that I wanted to make paper. And I went to Don Farnsworth at Magnolia Editions, and Don is by far, I think, the best American paper maker that we have, and he let me apprentice there, and I stayed there for 8 years. And as I left, he gave me a printing press. So we had a studio in the back of our house where we were making prints and etchings and all kinds of different things. And actually, if you go upstairs, you'll see the work of the press, because everything that's in that exhibit upstairs that Barbara and I did is from that press. And much of it was made here after the press got to the community center. they started making prints, and Kelly August, where is Kelly? Kelly in the back. She's our print coordinator here, and she's terrific. And so everything that's in that show is made on the press. And there's some stuff that was made at Eastside Editions, and I made the paper for everything in that show. And I have to say, I get a warm glow when I go in that room. I think you will too.
I'm Chester Arnold. My engagement with printmaking goes back to high school. I had a copy of a Dover edition of the Disasters of War by Francesca Goya. And for some reason I thought that I could do that too. And so I went out and bought a piece of copper. I didn't have a press. I had a book press actually, the kind of screw top book press. And I thought, oh, that'll look good in the press. I struggled. I didn't have anybody who could teach it to me at the time. But I persisted anyway, and it wasn't until I got into junior college at College of Marin in 1971 that I got into a printmaking class and began making prints. Primarily on zinc plates because I couldn't afford copper plates. And my friend Pierre Flandreau and I, we were co-conspirators there, we probably made 100 or more prints in the department. Usually we'd make one per class. We have a little plate that was 2 by 3 inches. And in fact, if you stick around, I have a pile of these in my portfolio. You're welcome to have one. They're mostly forgettable prints, but they are real etchings. And the enthusiasm that came from that, making that process and seeing how an idea, which is really what drives me to do what I do, an idea for an image can be turned into something that can be multiplied and disseminated to more than one person, was very exciting. It didn't lead to any remuneration whatsoever. In the end, none of the prints that I made were particularly big sellers, either then or now. But I, every so often, get around to making them again, simply because the process itself is so compelling. And Simon invited me to work with Eastside Editions earlier in this, should I say, earlier in this century. And they had the benefit of having a beautiful press, a beautiful printer, Dave Avery, who was working, and beautiful paper that he had made. So a lot of the things that I made are on that paper. And I have on the easel, if you want to look at later, maybe I'll just stand up for a minute. The sequence of print that I did there at Eastside Editions. It starts with a overlay of a pencil drawing, which was of the print itself. And then under that is the first proof of the press from a copper plate. That has notes on where the halftones are going to be in. If you go upstairs, you'll see a lot of prints that have what was called aquatint, which is a process for creating halftones, and eventually led to this rather severe, which was then burnished and made into a lighter plate. But those are 3 stages from the original drawing to the final, and these are all done on, I don't know that the final edition was done on Simon's paper, but I think those would be Etched.
I'd just like to say that when he did finish one of the prints, which is in this exhibition upstairs, he hand colored it, and it is a spectacular print, and I love it. So
I think I did 10 hand colored prints, and I'm rather sorry I agreed to do that, to tell you the truth. Because
I know you had a good time doing that.
You have one print which is hand colored, and you have to match all the other ones. So in front of me on the easel was the hand colored print, and I had the other prints one by one. All set out on my table with watercolors mixed to the degree that they're supposed to be blah, blah, blah. So it took a longer time than I thought it ever would, but I had done it before. And time is for art making. So whenever I'm doing that, I'm happy. So anyway, I wanted to mention too, another connection I had with Etched was when I was involved with more directly with the museum on the collections committee. I curated a show of Rembrandt's etchings, which was one of the highlights of my career as a curator. There was a show of Rembrandt's etchings of beggars, and my friend Al Farrow, who I happen to be having a show with starting next month on June 6th in Captain Clark Gallery, he had done a series of bronzes of beggars that they looked like they walked right out of Rembrandt's etchings. So that was a great show. It was a beautiful show, and I got to see firsthand these prints that were made 500 years ago? Is it? No, not that, 400 years ago. And how treasured they are still. So I can't say the same 400 years from now, I doubt that.
Yeah.
You're always aiming to do the best thing you can do. That's what we all should do. That's what we try to do, and that's what I know. Simon agrees to making the best.
So as you might have gathered, we're not talking about prints coming out of a printer or posters. It's more called fine art print. Would you say? I introduced myself already. Thank you. You can bring it, save it for the Q&A. Upstairs, we in the gallery, we have etchings, and those are in Talio, and there's words like lithography, lino cut. Could you, one of you, just kind of elaborate on what we're talking about when we're talking about prints?
Well, Chester and I have talked about this before. Have we talked about this? I suppose we have. I consider print, the prints that I wanted to make were always etchings. And they were done with high-skilled people doing them and etching into the copper. And we used copper. I don't think we ever used anything but copper. There are other things you can use as plates, but we used copper. And what you do is you put the ink on the plate, and you then, using your hard-earned strength and a variety of other things, you try to get the ink in the cracks of the plate, the etching part. And then the etch comes when the ink is forced back up out of the plate onto the paper. And you then have something that, if you do it right, you get what you drew on the etching. Better?
And a lithography?
Yeah, I want to just say, most etchings, one of the tactile things about them that's satisfying is that even in some small etchings, there's a raised line on the surface, and also an embossing around the edge of the image where the plate was placed on the paper and run through a press with felt padding, so that little dimpled edge and the raised line are just some of the rich aesthetics of the actual print itself. Not that you could really sell that to a big crowd, but believe me, as an image maker, it's a step above anything that's available, at least so far, in G-clade, so-called G-clade printing, which I know Simon doesn't like the word, I don't either, but we do occasionally make one. So that's the intaglio print process is using that engraved or etched or scratched line to pull those lines out that I was just describing. The other one was a planographic process, which is lithography, which is done on stones, and was developed in 19th century Germany. And that's another process which doesn't have the same satisfaction of a raised line, but it allows for mass production. I mean, it was used, you probably remember litho stones, limestones in antique shops for years. You would see old checking or bills of lading that were printed off of a litho stone that were still on the stone because they were used so extensively in 19th century. So that's the other process we don't have in our prints here, but it's probably the most prominent fine art print press. Yes.
You are explaining the technique and the difficulties of it very nicely, but to me, the most important thing, and that you haven't mentioned, is that it comes out reversed.
Oh, you mean upside down and backwards?
It's a perfect process for somebody who's left-handed. Thinks backwards, that's me. So you would think that I would be really good at it, but I'm actually.
It's kind of like when you have a stamp and you put ink on it and you stamp the paper, it's the reverse of what was on the rubber stamp.
It is a test of compositional. As a teacher, I know Francis McCormick was a teacher for many, many decades, and a composition is an important thing. How work is composed on the plate, left to right, because we tend to read things left to right in the West. And you really had to think about that in making a print. How is this going to work? And I think in this case, I flipped my paper back and forth to look at how it was going to be appear, and then.
But it's very challenging.
Very challenging.
David, can you share about monoprints and maybe some other prints we haven't mentioned yet?
Sure, yeah, there's monoprints, serigraphy, there's calligraphy, which is a good friend of mine, Carl Caston, who taught at Cal for 30 years. He was one of the innovators, along with Glenn Alps at University of Washington, which is sort of a mix of Intalia and other processes. It creates a lot of texture. It's really good for like abstract expressionist prints. And a lot of people are familiar with like serigraphy. A lot in the 60s. When I was a kid, we did that in elementary school. You do a silk screen and the inks will go through the silk screen.
Just awareness,
Yeah,
unbalanced.
I think those are the main ones, but I got to look at the history of paper really quick for this, and I think most people agree that paper was invented about 100 AD in China, and people started doing wood blocks pretty soon after. They figured, hey, this is a good medium. And then, something I want to talk a little bit about later, I'm going to do a little case study on Hokusai, the great Japanese woodblock printer. Those folks in Japan in the 19th century did incredible, innovative work, and hopefully I'll have time to talk a little bit about that. And their woodblocks made it to Europe, and a lot of the Impressionists, Van Gogh, and others were radically influenced by them. And then my 30-second history of printing, I got to talk about Stanley Hayter, who's opened up Atelier 17 studio in Paris in 1927. And he taught all the famous, European modernists how to do prints. And then in the war, he came to New York and set up in New York. So a lot of the New York school, the famous great artists that we know about, also learned from Hayter. But that's a quick tour.
And then giclée, which actually is printed on a machine. Can you talk about a little bit about what giclée
Giclée,
is?
otherwise known as archival ink printing, is a thing that you see most of in artists' editions now, of especially images that are made from artists' paintings. Like there's the people that I use to photograph my work in Petaluma, the Digital Grange, is an enormously successful and very, very busy producer of both photography and prints made from painting, photographs of paintings. It's a good way to get a relatively accurate.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
You can't. Okay, I'll try to. It's an accurate way of getting colors reproduced in a clear photograph, but it's all done by digital ink jets. So there's no actual process of hand making anything in the process of the print. It relies on expertise in the computer programs, which are oftentimes going awry. And it's fun to watch somebody like a master, like in fact Don Farnsworth, who's the papermaker, is one of the, I was absolutely gobsmacked watching him manipulate images on his computer on their way to becoming a tapestry, and using the same kind of technology. So it's a world that, for instance, a lot of people will make prints and market them to hotels, for instance. Like a hotel might want, or a hotel chain might want 2,000 images of a particular thing. And if you have somebody to make those prints for you, one of the traditional challenges artists face is, how do I make a living doing this? Which is perennial. And so that's one way to do it. And I think Alex Cole, who is local, she used to teach here. Alex Cole has been very successful at getting her work out there and marketing it that way. And you still see her original paintings sort of all over town and elsewhere too. So, but it's easy to do. Anyone can do it. If you can have any painting of any kind, whether your kid did it or you did it or your grandma did it. You can have it made into a giclée print.
So one of the things that we talk about, Chester and me, I'm not much for giclée. I like the hand stuff, and I like the stuff by hand. And one of the things that happens when you're printing is what I call the big reveal. So when the print goes through the press, the ink is pressed up onto the paper. So then you are at the other end of the printer, and you go over there and you start to take your print off of the. And there is not an artist in the world who doesn't like print, but if you start to take the print off of the plate, it is the most exciting. I call it the big reveal. You pick it up, piece it, and pull it off of the plate, and you've got this magnificent print. And we saw these prints over here, so It's very exciting, and I've never met anybody who doesn't get a charge on it, pulling the print off their plate, and it's very exciting.
I don't know how this happened, but
We're going to have questions later.
our daughter Lily makes her living by making prints out of her house with presses, and she makes these videos of the reveal and the sound of the paper being peeled off and the line of it, and it's so exciting. And then she holds it up, and you think, "Oh my God, how did she do that?" This is somebody who went to UC Santa Barbara as a pre-med and changed majors halfway through and ended up with a printmaking degree from Santa Cruz, and is more successful marketing her work than I've ever been. If you're interested, Lily Arnold Studios is her tag.
Sell it, baby.
Yeah.
So one other aspect about prints is addition. And so some of these kind of questions I have around that are, how do you decide how many of these prints you're going to make? I understand that they take a long time, they're very difficult. So I'm guessing a hand printer doesn't want to make 100 of them. And so how do you decide edition sizes? What kind of decisions or things do you think about when you consider how many are in an edition?
I can tell you about East Side Editions. That was the name of our press. We never made an edition print that was over 20 because, and when we finished that, we scratched the plate because that was the fair way to do it. And candidly, the photographic process does not interest me very much, and because I got going with what you could see and what you could get when you were doing it, and it was a labor of love for us, for sure. And so our edition sizes were 20. I don't know what, Chester, have you made more than 20 prints of anything?
I think I've done 50 of some prints, but they were really small, so easy to
How much you do?
I've made prints, but I like to collect them more than making them. So I have to talk about that later.
That's what we like to hear as artists. I love to hear that. So the number of prints in an edition, in some ways it depends on who's making them and what the demand is. I know that the editions coming out of, I work for, I did a fellowship at the Cameron Institute doing lithographs in Albuquerque for a couple of weeks. And in that case, they were making editions of 100, but they had a full-time staff pulling those prints. And then they would split the studio, and I think Simon did the same thing. Excuse me, the artists would get half of the prints to sell, to do whatever they want with, and the studio would get to keep the other half to market to help fund the whole process, which was really an amazing thing to be able to do. And I think, was the Catherine Brown's place, did they do that too?
Yeah, it was
I don't know what Catherine did. That's Crown Point Press. Very fantastic operation. I own, Kimberly and I own at least a half a dozen Crown Point Press prints. And high skill, great artists, wonderful prints. She printed Tebow, she printed Dievenkorn, she printed Cat Steer, she printed everybody around. And there is one little story. Do you mind?
This is the greatest part of the set.
So I walked into Crown Point Press and I saw Bob Bechtel's work. And Bob Bechtel was a wonderful, realistic painter. He painted San Francisco street scenes. That was what he did. And he worked at CCA where I was on the board. So I got to know Bob, and he was a teacher. He got there for at least 20, 25, maybe 30 years. Got his degree at CCA. So I went to him and I said I would like to have him print with me at our press right here around the block. And he said, if I do that, Catherine will kill me. So he never printed with me, and he's since passed, which unfortunate.
Can I tell one more story about the Crown Point Press?
Yeah, I just want to quickly say CCA is the California College of the Arts.
This story relates to the museum too. I think it's one quite a while ago. it was when I was involved more with it. And the museum got a call from a lady who lived in Boys Hot Springs. She said, I got some prints I think I want to give to the museum for their wall-to-wall show or whatever it is, so we want to donate them to the auction. And so she said, I think there's a demon corn thing. And they said, oh yeah, that's probably a poster. So they sent me over to her house. I go over to her garage, and in her garage is a wooden box, a fairly large wooden box, and on the box says Dana Wright Gallery, Crown Point Press. I open up the box, and inside the box is a complete suite of 8 large-scale soft-ground etchings by Richard Diebenkorn, which have an individual value of like $15,000 a piece at least. And she had no idea. Dana had owed her some money back in the 70s, and he said, take this with it, it'll be worth something someday. And she was gobsmacked. We all were gobsmacked, and I think the museum made a good amount of money selling those prints. They were gorgeous Ocean Park period. One of the most desirable period of those prints at the time. Anyway, that's the last story I'll tell. I'm sorry.
I love that story.
When was that? What year was that?
That had to be, let's see, 1998 or something like that.
I think we have time. What does an artist look for when they're selecting paper? Because there are handmade paper makers, and there's, I hear brands of paper, names being thrown out there, and it's clearly a big deal.
I never met an artist who wanted to use handmade paper to print for a print. They thought that they would lose the texture that they wanted by using a hand paper. My intention when we started Eastside Editions was to make paper that was so good that the artist would want to print on it. And I think we actually accomplished that. And in the show upstairs, there's a book that's made out of handmade paper. It took us a year to make the book, and we had to make all the paper for it. And honestly, I never met, nobody ever said to me, no, this isn't good enough, because I was pretty exacting about what I wanted to make. So anyway, no, I don't think they would prefer to print on handmade paper.
Well, as a former printmaker, as a student, even then, the aesthetic of printing on making a print required two things. One, that it be a cotton paper, acid-free paper, so that it could survive without deteriorating from acids in the paper. So to do that, the standard paper that was used in the classroom and elsewhere, and I still have used it when I've made prints, is a Reeves BFK, which is a nice, kind of a beautiful soft white. It comes in different tones. You can get an off-white and a buff color, but it's a thick paper that it allows you to pick up all the lines that Simon was describing that are etched into a plate, pull it out, and have a nice dimple around its edge. So it's a relatively inexpensive paper, or it was. It's not. I realize not anymore. It's probably 10 times what it was when I was a student. But that's a really beautiful paper to work with, and I think that a couple of these are made with BFK because we saved. And you'll notice also the handmade papers have, especially Simon's papers, have the most beautiful edge from the screening of the paper, which is the beautiful deckled edge, which you don't want to frame out of visibility because it's part of the aesthetic of the print to see that deckled edge. It's so beautiful. It's an object in itself, and I would say that really differentiates it from giclées, which are coming off of a roll and they cut it, and it's just like a poster. Yeah.
So also sounds like the paper you choose will help determine the longevity of your print, which then also adds to its value, I would assume. What are some other things that might affect a print's value? We talked about edition size, the quality of the paper, the ink. What are some other things that might make one print more valuable than another?
Well, the artist is a big one.
Well,
yeah, Richard, there's a big difference between Richard Diebenkorn and me. Print value, believe me. And that's an important one, but you got to start somewhere.
Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I found a portfolio about 25 years ago, Have anybody heard of the Sausalito Six? It's a group of artists in the late 40s. Richard Diebenkorn was one of them. And I found this portfolio is about 18 prints. There's 3 Diebenkorns and the 5 other artists. It was really raw and funky, but I didn't know anything about it, and I did buy it. And it turned out to be very rare. And it turned out to be the first abstract expressionist group portfolio ever created. And the British Museum found a copy, and the Met found a copy. But I just reacted to this direct expression on paper, well, pretty much direct, through this little printing press that these 6 artists found in Mill Valley. So no one even knows how many prints, how many editions they did. I focus on Bay Area historical artists mostly, and it's rare when you see a number on a print from the 50s or 40s that they finished that series. They may have done 3 out of 20 or 3 out of 30. Later on, like I also collect Nathan Oliveira. He left his painting practice in the early 60s to devote totally to lithography. And they're so reasonable. People are overlooking these things, but he took years just to dedicate himself to that. So he was affiliated with big galleries, and he finished those editions. So when it says 1 of 20, you know he did 20 plus probably a few artist proofs, plus other things as well. But most of the artists, there might be 1 or 2 of the prints out there from historical.
I wanted to mention when I was a teenager, I grew up and spent a lot of time in Munich, Germany, and I suppose this was true here in cities, big cities. It was very common for artists on the weekends to set up a little impromptu wall with their prints for sale, because it was a way for people who weren't known to make a few bucks to help finance, and it was also a way for the public to be engaged with the printmaking process, which at the time, let's see, in 1960 something, that was only 50 years after Ernst Ludwig Kirchner had made his woodcuts. So, I mean, there were still living people who had known him. In fact, you would talk to them on the street. So there was something about the cultural excitement of seeing art that was really being made in that time available to be purchased. And I think a lot of average people could afford to spend, the equivalent of $5 or $10 on an original print, which they did, and I did at the time. Yes.
Some years ago, we were in, I think it was Nuremberg, went to Albert Durer's house, bought an etching made from, they said, made from the original metal, the original. And
It could have been.
That probably cost $75. It's a mother and child. Did you ever see that?
It's a bargain. I'd say that's a bargain.
I would say that was about 10 to 15 years. I don't know exactly.
That gets into the subject of what Simon was mentioning earlier about scoring the plates to limit the edition so it couldn't be done.
Yeah.
There are plates made by Rembrandt that are still being printed off of. The prints are diminishing quality, but they still are made from an original Rembrandt plate. So they are floating around unless those plates were destroyed. And who else is there? There are Goya plates too that I think are reeditioned and have been reeditioned over time. So when you're collecting prints, you need to, if you were thinking about doing that, it's always good to talk to an expert like David to make sure that where is this thing coming from, and is it an actual lifetime made print? Or I had a friend who purchased a woodcut of Albert Dürer. It turned out it wasn't from his lifetime. It was sold as a lifetime print, but it turned out it had a fraction of the value of the original because it was a reproduction basically.
Yeah, I can just follow up quickly with some valuations that I looked up. So Old Masters, the top 5 of auction. Well, Dürer is at 4 and 5, 650,000, 577,000 for one print, and those were done by him probably near the time when he created the plate. Number 1 is a Rembrandt at 990,000 in 1990. Impressionist Pablo Picasso, $5 million. In 2011, Matisse is second at $4 million. And then contemporary Andy Warhol Mao print went for $2.5 million. in 2012. Jasper Johns is on there and others. You know, if you go online, I'm going to talk really quickly, if I may, about the Hokusai Great Wave. He first printed that around 1830. And he made thousands of those were made early on. But probably 1,000 that he worked on pretty directly. And that's what people want. And they're estimating that maybe, how many survive? We mentioned it earlier. Maybe 250 of those still survive.
Who is that?
Hokusai, the Japanese printmaker, and the Great Wave. And here's a partial of the Great Wave. Everyone knows that. It's in showers. It's on bags. But you know, you can get a print for $20 online. But one just went for 2.3 million. One of the early ones. And so there are a lot of ways that you can look at that, trying to figure that aspect out. But as I was mentioning, only about 250 of those early ones still survive. Like in photography, do people know Moonrise over Hernandez by Ansel Adams? It's one of his most famous, maybe his most famous. That's probably pushed $1 million. I read Mary Allender's biography of him. They think there's about 1,500 of them floating around out there. Not a lot of people know that. If they did, I don't know, it would probably affect the value.
It's better than Bitcoin, in my opinion. At least you have a thing.
I agree.
I mean, let's say one of us would want to start buying prints, or we're interested in buying prints, aside from going to big famous auctions to buy $1 million prints. And what are some ways that we could access prints?
Can I speak to that just for a second?
Let's take that one.
So I'm a print guy, and I like prints. And that's what we started collecting, because when I was in the studio at Magnolia, every mid-20th century, mid-century artist in California came into Magnolia, and I met every one of them. And I bought stuff from every one of them because they all had prints. And I actually, aside from my pal Francis, every artist I've ever talked to really likes making prints. And Francis made a print with us, and it's a fabulous print. And but I think it was because she was being kind to me. And anyway, I like the idea of starting your print and your collecting days with print, because you can afford it, and you can take a good look at it, and you get a huge selection. Artists love printing, and I think it's a fabulous way to start your collection. And we have a lot of prints, and I keep buying them. I don't know, it doesn't matter to me. I do have a little problem with the Giclées because they weren't.
We've heard.
Okay, that's it.
I'll say this, there's annual printmaking sales too at the East Bay Printmakers Collective has a big sale every year because our daughter sells her prints there. And their UC Santa Cruz printmaking department has an annual sale too. That's a really great thing to go to. It's usually happening in the early summer because you have all these young and talented people experimenting with the print media, and they do all kinds of things I've never seen before. When I overlays multiple prints, etchings, lithos on etchings on lithos, etc. So that's a really good place to help sponsor and inspire the young person that's making that work. And you might end up, should you live long enough for it to rise in value, that gets to me a really important part of it is don't collect anything unless you love it.
That's right.
Love the thing that you're collecting, because it really doesn't matter ultimately whether it's going to be worth more or less. When 30 years from now, it's going to enrich your life to have it around. So that's been my experience in all the prints that I have, and paintings too, for that matter.
Oh, that's great, Chester. I agree with that totally. I just want to mention condition as related to valuation. I mean, everything's online. There are wonderful databases for pricing online. But the thing with prints and photographs, it's very tough to figure out the condition online. Do ask for a condition report if you're looking at a small auction. It's really best to see in person. We have one of the top print dealers in the country is in Santa Rosa. Annex Galleries, he's been doing that for 60 years, Daniel. There's over 10,000 prints in a house there on Mendocino, and people don't realize what a resource we have there. We have a wonderful photography dealer here in town, Scott Nichols, who specializes in historical F-64, and you can go in there and he'd be happy to share all his print collection with
He
you.
moved to San Rafael.
Has he moved now?
Yes.
He's been threatening a move for a long
I
time.
know. He found a space on 4th Street.
Well, you'll have to go a little further for Scott now.
Worth it.
Okay.
I have one other story about the condition of the print. I had some friends who passed away, and their children brought a bunch of the artwork that they had in that they bought of mine, and asked me if I wanted it back, and I said sure. They weren't selling it to me, just giving it to me. And among these were people that lived in Hawaii. I would say this: do not collect prints if you live in Hawaii, because all the prints looked like they had been splattered with brown paint. They were all foxed. They all had mold. I looked at them and I'm just going to toss these. There's no getting rid of that stuff. So,
If you live in Hawaii, collect sculpture.
yeah, moisture and it is the enemy of prints on paper for sure.
Well, thank you. I think we leave a little time here for some Q&A, and if you want to raise your hand, I'll come by with the mic.
Stand up.
So I have bought quite a few prints online at auctions, and you don't have to pay $1 million for a signed artist. And I wonder if like half of them are forged or not. Talk about not getting ripped off if you have any. I mean, you can get a certificate of authenticity. That's as good as the paper it's printed on half the time. So I just wonder what you think. I mean, they're legitimate auction houses and they're small auction houses. So what do you think?
Yeah, good auction houses will stand behind their art. You know, I'm not going to name names, but there's some really famous artists who've been, copied. Printmakers, really famous. And even one really famous post-war artist who got caught backdating his art, prints and other things. It's kind of shocking. But so overall, though, I think there's a pretty good discipline about that. I found sort of trying to put the spotlight on overlooked artists who were well known in their day. There's kind of a correlation between value and copies that are out there. People don't tend to copy obscure artists, so that's one little hack that I have.
I started collecting when I was working in Eastern Europe. And I also want to mention that anywhere you go in South America, particularly Mexico, Cuba, you're going to find a very rich printmaking realm. And they're wonderful. They're really good. And in terms of editions, as the edition gets higher, the price goes up? Or does the price stay the same? My understanding was when you buy it earlier, it stays at it's a certain price. And then as the edition sells, the price goes up. Is that true?
That's not mine.
Some people do that. As they move along in edition, they will go up. That happens in photography and fine art prints. That's more of kind of a business model for that. Used to be, you wanted an early print in edition. I don't think that holds true really much anymore in that way. Do you want to add to that?
Well, I just want to add, as we sort of get toward the end of this, I want to go back to what Chester said. I think when you see something you love, when you see something you want, when you see something that you can afford, when you see an artist who you think is up and coming, that's what you're supposed to be buying. Things that you love and like. Don't worry about names and stuff like that. That's not a good place to start print collecting. I mean, yes, demon corn, you can buy a demon corn, you can buy a candy apple, you can buy Tebow's candy apple, you can buy a Hokusai. All you need is money. And, no, I'm serious, you should be buying, when you start to collect, or if you are collecting art, buy what you love. And I mean, I have a very patient wife. I'm still buying art. I don't know what the hell I'm doing. But I buy what I like. And that's the way I do it.
That's good.
Any other questions?
Hi. I just wanted to mention that talking about an early print in the edition versus a later print. Back in the day, if you were printing like a dry point, it could wear out. So the later prints could not be quite as wonderful as the first ones.
Well, they must have been making a lot of them.
Well, I mean, wasn't that was my understanding, that sometimes that's why, I mean, you shouldn't, they should all be the same.
Well, some of the early Rembrandt editions of his, like the 100 Gilder print, and if you look at the original plate of some of those things, it looks like he must have had an incredibly strong arm to gouge that plate. It's like a trough that's just, and the trough eventually presses down and it loses the burr on the edges that catches the ink, so you do get a lesser rich print in subsequent editions. So that is true, that it would, if you did make 25, more than 25, I think you then may start thinking about that. It has to do with the softness of the copper, has to do with the pressure of the press, the quality of the printing, etc. But in general, I think it's a truism.
I thought you knew everything.
Is there a market for buying, I just lost the word, what you print on? The plates. I mean, I was initially thinking, oh my God, to have one of those plates that is ended and scratched. I thought that'd be kind of fun to buy that.
New art market is opening for you.
I have a couple plates of prints that I did long ago. I don't think they have any value at all in my case, but I think they really don't know about that as a market, because anybody buying them would probably be more interested in making more prints and selling them rather than just sitting in the presence of the object itself and feeling the glow.
Upstairs in the gallery, we do have a copper plate on display, and it does look pretty good on the wall.
Copper plates are so beautiful, and they're so beautiful to work on. And it wasn't until I connected with Simon, invited me to the East Side Editions, that I got to just have these huge copper plates to work on. And wow, that's, and they had a bunch, don't make as many as you want. We'll print them up. And I think we probably did about 5 prints together, maybe. Yeah, anyway, it's kind of fun.
Is there a tension between buying these prints for display, framing them, putting them on walls to see, versus having them in avoiding sunlight in dark places and only rarely taking out to the family?
Yeah, that's a real issue. I think museums have a rule of a few months where a piece will be up, and they have to rotate it. That's kind of a general policy. Yeah, you definitely want to have lower light, natural light. That is a concern. But if you take care of these things, it's amazing how paper survives. I mean, you see these Albrecht Dürer prints from the 16th century. They're actually doing a lot better than some of these paintings. I mean, I know maybe folks don't realize these paintings in museums, if it's more than 100 years old, these things have been heavily conserved and restored, almost every single one of them, where paper can hold up pretty good.
Well, the Chinese invented paper. It's an invention. It's just like a light bulb. The guy invented paper. He saw things working.
Paper wasps
working in the fields, and he saw them drawing their things across. And he invented paper from that, from seeing that. And the truth is that paper is incredibly resilient. And there are still thousands of Chinese grave markers. They always used to mark graves with handmade paper.
Wow.
And there are thousands of those in existence, and I've seen them. And they have to be 1,500, 1,800, 2,000 years old. And it's quite amazing. So yeah, paper's resilient, great product.
Chester talked about having some pieces that were foxed. And there are paper conservators who can reverse that or attempt to reverse that, aren't there?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, yeah. And one of them's in Oakland.
More expensive in my case than it's worth.
Well, yeah, it's very expensive, yeah.
I have one fun question. If you could own any print in existence,
That's a good question.
disregarding the financial list there, you could, totally be a fan and pick one, what would it be?
Go ahead.
I know, there's a dry point of Rembrandt's self-portrait as a young man. He's making his facial gesture. It's a pretty famous one. It's so surprising. It cuts through the time. It's a beautiful one. That's the one I would want.
So the print I like the best, and I really, there's lots of choices, but
Hold your mic up, please.
I must admit, I would buy the Hokusai Wave. It's a wood block, so therefore it is not a copper plate or anything. It's a series of blocks carved into the block, and that block creates the motion for the wave. And it's a spectacular print. I've seen a live one. You've seen the live one, right? You must have seen it too. Anyway, I want to say one more thing. If you haven't seen the show that's upstairs, I think you could spend a lot of time doing a lot of other things and not get as much as 10 minutes you would get in the gallery. And we can talk the three of us, we can talk for ages. But these prints speak for themselves.
The signage is really excellent too, written by, I think you wrote the signage.
Oh, Barbara and I.
You both really interesting.
Don't tell the truth, Barbara.
Let's let David tell us what his favorite dream print is.
I'm sorry.
The Hokusai would be up there, the Great Wave, but
It's been taken.
yeah,
so.
I'd say probably Albert Dürer, St. Jerome in his
Oh,
study.
God, that's a great print. Oh,
Can't
my
change
God.
now, Simon. You want to swap? I can pick an artist who didn't do a lot of prints, but did some beauties. One of my favorite artists is Edward Hopper. And, I love some of those prints that he did.
Okay, well, thank you very much to you. Recording and supporting us in the community center. And perhaps your collecting journey will begin upstairs.
It's open, yeah.
Also, Chester has those prints if someone is interested. He's handing out free prints, folks.
See you. See you soon.